Hello, everybody. Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report. It's Tuesday's edition. And folks, we are broadcasting from beautiful Southern California in our Irvine studios. Happy to have you with us this week. It's great being back in studio again and off the road. And I want to welcome my millennial minister of truth, Drew, from the wine country of California. Happy to have you with me today, my friend.
Hey, good to be with you. You know, it's another exciting venture. And we've got two, of course, rebels in the communist state of California.
Yes, we do. Hey, listen, I've been hearing things all across the map on this speech tonight, you know, the State of the Union. And this comes from both Democrats and Republicans, Drew, so it's not monolithic to one party or the other. Some of them are saying, well, Biden should do this, he should talk about this. Others are saying this is so boring, we should just cancel the damn thing. Drew, where do you come down on this? You've heard some of the same stories I've heard about, you know, things he's putting out there. You know, we're going to do this for mental health. Oh, God, okay. Well, you know, we got to tax billionaires. We got to tax oil companies. Give me some advice on what we're going to listen to tonight, Drew.
Well, the only thing we're going to hear are CCP-style propaganda talking points. That's it. I mean, all the guy can do is lie, and that's all he has done. And he's been practicing for this speech by putting out tweets. Well, he doesn't do it, but whoever in his administration is doing it. Right. And so we're going to hear him continue to put forth this lie based on the pandemic that he's created more jobs than any American president in our history. We're certainly going to hear that, which is not true. If you tell 40 million people they can't go to work, and then the next week you tell them they can go to work, you did not create 40 million jobs. But so desperate is he to have a victory that he will continue to go back and reach to the pandemic to try and give him some kind of numbers. He's going to talk about the unemployment rate. You know, it hasn't been as low, I believe, since 1969. I think it's at 3.5%, but it was also 3.5% before the pandemic under Donald Trump. So that's not a victory. I mean, we aren't better off than we were pre-pandemic in America. You know, and he's going to rail against the Republicans, and he's going to bring up their proposal for a national sales tax to replace the income tax and abolish the IRS. Now, the Democrats, what frustrates me is, you know, they don't debate about the merits of replacing it with a income tax, which actually has a lot of benefits. The government would probably make more money, and the American taxpayer would be better off because we would, if we were paid $100,000, we'd actually get $100,000, and then we were taxed on based on our purchases. And really, if you look at California, for example, you know, if you make $100,000 in LA, for example, you actually pay $30,000 in taxes when all is said and done. And so instead of having $70,000 and then going and paying taxes, well, you'd have $100,000 and just pay tax on what you spent. But the Democrats, of course, are liars. And what they continue to do is say that the Republicans want to tax your goods and services at 30% with a national sales tax. Well, that's not true because they want to also abolish the income tax. So they're playing games. And of course, this administration can't do anything but lie because anything else would expose them as the complete, utter failures that they are.
I don't understand why they don't just, quote, take a victory lap and say, hey, folks, unemployment's at 3.5%. The economy grew at 3%. I mean, there's some things the Federal Reserve has helped orchestrate, whether you agree or disagree with their policies. The facts of the matter are, right now, Jay Powell said it today in a speech before the Economic Club of Washington. In this country, there are 5 million more jobs than people to fill them. And, you know, the economy, we are 3.5% unemployment. Now, when Powell came out today and started talking, it almost sounded like he wasn't going to do anything with interest rates anymore. The market skyrocketed. Then all of a sudden he said, hey, listen, unless we get this inflation rate further down, which you and I know it has to come down further, then further interest rate hikes may be warranted. The market gave up everything. So now it's back hovering near the flat line. But Drew, he's going to talk about really dumb stuff tonight, like taxing billionaires on unrecognized gains. That will do nothing. It's going nowhere. He's talking about taxing stock buybacks. Again, coming out of Congress, that's not going to happen. Some mental health issues. I mean, literally, I think there's a reason why 58% of the Democrats do not want this guy to run again, Drew. And it's just, he's 80 and he's not giving us any vision for the future.
Well, you've got his detractors and certainly the Democrat voters out there. He's not a popular candidate to run for reelection, but he's got some powerful allies in the Democrat Party, like Jim Clyburn out of South Carolina. Right, that's who really Joe Biden can thank for really getting the nomination to begin with. So Jim Clyburn was actually on one of the propagandist news shows the other day, and he says, in terms of people questioning whether Biden's age should be an issue or not, that he's seen 72-year-olds who aren't as mentally acute and energetic as the 80-year-old Biden. And I would say, yes, if you were walking through a cemetery and the ages matched up, yes, then I would say I've seen a 72-year-old that was worse off than the 80-year-old Joe Biden. But as far as a walking corpse, no, there are plenty of people, including Donald Trump, who are obviously could run laps around him at that age.
It's interesting you brought up James Clyburn, and he is the singular person in the United States responsible for Joe Biden being president. And Drew, it comes as really no surprise to anyone that follows politics that Shazam, South Carolina is now going to be the first Democratic primary state. I mean, Drew, what was the chance that was going to happen after you had the fiasco of the Iowa caucuses 3 years ago, and you have New Hampshire where Joe Biden came in 5th place? I mean, there's zero chance that the administration wanted Joe Biden, who is likely going to run for re-election, to start off losing the Iowa caucuses, which he inevitably would do, with its 90% white voter turnout, or New Hampshire, similar demographics, but a primary state. Drew, all this made perfect sense for him to move, the Democrats to move South Carolina to the top of the heap.
Well, it did. And I mean, this is the strongest evidence that I think that the likelihood of Joe Biden running for reelection, despite what we think, whether he should or not, I mean, apparently a lot of people in the know in the Democratic Party, there are powerful people who want him to run for reelection, that think that he's their best candidate still. And I mean, that is the evidence of it. I mean, to your point, I mean, that's how it's been for a long time. But you're right. In 2020, I think that in Iowa, Joe Biden came in 4th, and then New Hampshire, like you said, he came in 5th. So, he didn't have any steam. So when he picked up South Carolina, that kind of changed the trajectory and momentum, and then people started dropping out of the race around Joe Biden. So by moving South Carolina to be the first primary, he's guaranteed a victory if Clyburn's going to back him. Yep. And so it'll give him some momentum going in. So it'll get rid of doubt. I mean, at this point, it's strategic because even more so than in 2020, people do question his ability to run because of his cognitive malfunctioning and he's weak and old. I mean, he's frail. And so, they don't want to deal with any questions early on with Iowa or New Hampshire. So by getting him a victory in South Carolina, I mean, they're hoping to tip the scale in his odds so that, he becomes the kind of de facto nominee again.
Yeah. I have zero say in the Democratic Party, obviously, but I think it makes a lot of sense from them moving away from Iowa. Caucuses, in my view, Drew, that's an ancient way to nominate candidates. Look, New Hampshire's had a special place in this country for a long time of being the first primary, but literally last year in Iowa, they couldn't even figure out who won the damn thing. And it took a couple days to figure it out, and you had people yelling and screaming, and it's a backwards way of doing things. So I will rarely give Democrats credit, but in this case, I think they're doing the right thing based on their voter base. Okay, look, African American women are the backbone of the Democratic Party. I believe so. And then we could go on to leftists and environmental. I could go through the whole litany of them. But the fact of the matter is, it did take South Carolina to propel him, and I think you're onto something right there. It's interesting. Let me give you a couple stats here. This is really interesting. These are people within the Democratic Party, and then the electorate as whole. 58% of Democrats, Drew, do not want Biden to run. That's 58% of Democrats. And here's some interesting poll numbers. And this is the electorate at general. 34% only believe he's honest. I was shocked by that number. I thought that number would be higher. 31% feel he's competent. I'm trying to figure out who these 31 are. 28% believe he can handle a crisis, and 28% believe he's mentally and physically competent. Those last two numbers, Drew, mentally and physically competent and handling a crisis, those are concerning numbers. The other two, you could maybe, partisan, whatever, but those last two numbers, when you're sub 30 on those two categories, Drew, that's a problem.
Yeah. I mean, I'm as surprised as you are that there's, it's not 0%. I get it. We live in a world in which there are plenty of dumb people out there, and cult members. But I mean, those are low. Those are very, very low and concerning. But the fact that they continue to push, Joe Biden like they are as the presumptive nominee for reelection. I mean, it kind of shows that party's as out of touch with maybe their voter base as the Republican Party oftentimes is at odds with their voter base. And I'm not talking about presidential candidates, but I'm talking about what just happened with the, with the GOP with Ronna McDaniel
right.
And all of that stuff. I mean, nobody really wanted her, but they went against the wishes of, I think, the Republican voter base at large, and renominated her to lead the charge there. So, it's interesting. I mean, in American politics today, these national politics, really, there's people pulling the strings, and they really care very little for what local constituents want, and so on and so forth. We see that in the Senate and in Congress in general as well. I mean, theoretically, right? These representatives, especially in the House, where there are more of them based on that are dedicated to representing specific districts as opposed to senators that represent the whole state. Oftentimes we see them just going party line, and this is a problem in America too. I mean, everything's so polarized that really you elect representatives to represent state interests. And even within Republican states and counties, there could be differences in what somebody wants in an agricultural area versus even some kind of more metropolitan area that would still be red if such a thing exists anymore. And so it's really just unfortunate. I mean, the country's so big. The way the media operates and everything else, I mean, we really have kind of lost control over our political process.
Let me ask you about two political figures today. Will Biden renominate Kamala Harris as his vice presidential running mate?
I don't see why not. If he's going to run for reelection, why he would change the ticket. Because nobody's voting based on the vice president on the ticket. That doesn't happen. It's irrelevant. And really, it is a serious decision because something could happen to a president. And I'm not wishing harm. I'm just saying that, when you have a president that's of the age of Biden or even a Trump or something like that, I mean,
it's important.
It is important who the vice president is because, look, it has happened in American history. I mean, FDR, of course, passed away. Was very ill during his fourth term, just as soon as he got in there, and he was replaced by Truman, I guess, right? So it is an important consideration, but the American public doesn't look. We're so malinformed and maleducated these days. We don't think about these considerations or care, and so it's really just about Joe Biden. And look, if they're not willing to shake up the ticket enough to get rid of Biden, replace him with somebody else like, Gavin Newsom or something like that, I don't know why they would then shake up the vice president.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you on that. And it's interesting. 49% of Republicans do not want Donald Trump to be the nominee. Now, that's half and half. I sort of get where that number is. It's too early. I'm not going to get into projections this early. I mean, until other candidates get in the race. But let me ask you this question. Kevin McCarthy, he represents Bakersfield area, not too far away from where you are. What do you make of how McCarthy's come out of the gate so far, and how do you think he's leading on the Republican side?
Well, frankly, I don't know what conservative warrior inhabited his body, but I hope that continues and they continue to take control of McCarthy. I've been really pleasantly surprised. I didn't expect much from McCarthy. His past certainly demonstrates him to be kind of an establishment person, but he's been nothing close to that so far. And so I am pleasantly surprised. I mean, his responses to the media, I did not even expect him to come out and be as articulate as he's been, as combative as he's been with the media and making his points. He's been impressive. I didn't know that he had the ability to be so articulate, to be honest. I mean, one of the big complaints I've had, and I know you've had too for, well, decades at this point, is it's so rare that Republican leadership has an ability or a desire to articulate anything or to address the American people in some kind of comprehensible way. And McCarthy's been able to do that, I think. And, you know, I mean, look, the only thing, and I'm not a pessimist, but I am, of course, skeptical these days of everyone. I think we all should be. That it's very important that we're that way because we've been let down and disappointed and betrayed too many times. But the one thing that McCarthy has on his side in terms of kind of changing and surprising us with his behavior is that really he's a lame duck. Leader at this point, majority leader. And I just mean that in the sense that no matter what he gets the Republican House majority to get behind, it's never going to be passed. So he can be as conservative as he wants right now, and he doesn't have to worry about anything actually being passed because, of course, we don't have the Senate, and also we don't have the executive branch. And Joe Biden has already said because he's so committed to bipartisanship that anything Republicans would send him, he would veto.
Right. Yeah. No, I think I'm in your camp. I'm pleasantly surprised by how he's come out of the gate so far. I think he is articulate. I've never worried about that side of him, but how he's handled himself, I'm pretty happy with him so far. And I think all the naysayers that said, it's just going to be a bunch of conservatives, they're going to be throwing stuff out. No. He is doing what he said he would do, which I think, is somewhat impressive. All right, let me move on. Let me move on to what I thought was a ridiculous story. Okay, yet it captivated the American public. This damn balloon that they finally, quote, shot down. Drew, I sort of look, am I wrong? But I'm like completely underwhelmed by the massive amount of coverage a damn balloon got. And I'm sitting there saying, so Biden decides to, quote, shoot it down over the water. I'm like, shoot it down? We could have just taken the damn thing down. Why do we have to, quote, shoot down a damn balloon? I mean, is this the most overblown, overhyped, or am I on just the wrong side of this one?
Well, look, I'm on the opposite side of you on this, but not necessarily for different reasons than you're laying out. I think that it was hyped for some of the wrong reasons, depending on what the political objective was. I think this is very significant because, to me, I think that this episode and the way it was handled, I mean, certainly it's a cover-up. Look, I mean, I guess the only way to do this is to go through a couple of the specifics. The only reason that we know about this balloon is because it was visible to the bare eye,
right.
And it was floating over Billings, Montana. And so well, look, the producer of my podcast, to be honest, he actually moonlights as a captain. He's a pilot on a commercial airline, and he was actually flying through Missouri and saw the balloon from the cockpit. And he obviously, the communication, all the pilots were very concerned. They were aware of this presence. I mean, it's very dangerous to be up there. Now, this was, they're flying 40,000 feet. This was up 55, 60. But he said, it was huge. It was massive.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, all the lies about this happened 3 times under Trump. No, it didn't. That's bogus. And his point, even as an airline pilot, is had this happen in the interior of the state, it's in our airspace. We have flights going all the time. There's no way this would have been, kept under wraps because just like him flying on his course, everyone saw it and was communicating about it. But I mean, this is the problem. I think that the balloon, to me, my take on this is that this was a test of Joe Biden's commitment to China. And I think that actually it brings into consideration the significance of those emails between Hunter Biden and CEFC Energy, the Chinese energy company, about the $4.5 million they paid Hunter Biden and Jim Biden, Joe Biden's brother, for introductions. The CEFC, they were an arm of the Communist Party there. They were used, for example, to go into the Czech Republic and get in the ear. In fact, the chairman of the CEFC actually in 2013 or 2015, I think it was, when they elected a new president in the Czech Republic, he went in and became an advisor to him. I mean, that's odd, right? I mean, can you imagine if Joe Biden had hired somebody that was a CEO of a Chinese energy company to be an economic advisor for him? So look, we know what the Chinese are up to. And to me, this was like Americans should have woken up. It was almost like a gift. And it was saying, hey, we're the communist Chinese. We can send this balloon into your country. It can float across for 7 days. And I dare you, Joe Biden, who we've paid off, or anybody else, to do anything about it. That's the message I got. They knew about this on January 28th. That's fine if they didn't communicate it to Joe Biden until Tuesday or Wednesday. But, it came over Alaska, the Aleutian Islands, went through Canada, came into Montana, and then it continued to fly. Look, the responses they gave were untrue.
Why didn't they just shoot it down in Montana? What? Montana is a massive state with a small population. Why the hell they let this thing go all the way off the Carolina coast? What was the reason for that?
Well, that's the $1 million question. And we don't know the answer to that. I would speculate and say that they weren't going to do it because they weren't going to upset China, because really, I mean, this is the real corruption problem in America that we need to have a discussion about. And we're not going to survive if we can't have it openly and understand that it's not conspiracy theory. The communist Chinese have infiltrated our country. They've infiltrated D.C. They've corrupted D.C. I mean, look, General Milley, that guy absolutely is corrupted. So is, for example, Anthony Blinken. I mean, look, Blinken is the guy that Joe Biden chose to run his Biden Penn Center that got all the money from the communist Chinese. Milley is a guy who, under the Trump administration, called his counterpart in China and committed treason and said, hey, if Trump does anything aggressive towards you, I will let you know ahead of time. I mean, that's unbelievable. Right. And furthermore, I mean, look at how this cover up happened. I mean, I call it this post-mortem, like Frankenstein monster, where they pick these half-truths or wholly untrue things and try and put them together to explain this. But it's not true that they couldn't shoot the balloon down and it would have harmed civilians on the ground. That's not true. I'm going to Montana again in June. I go there every year. You can get in the car and drive for 2 hours and never see a single human being. It's very unpopulated. So that's not true.
Right.
And their response kept changing. Look, the answer that Bloomberg reported, for example, that the reason they didn't do anything, et cetera, was that, one, they hoped that the American people wouldn't learn about the balloon because they didn't want it to interrupt Blinken's trip. The second thing is they didn't want it to interrupt or give Republicans fodder for the 2024 elections. Now, whether that's true or not, they don't make sense. I mean, Blinken, for example, canceled his trip on Friday, hours before he was supposed to go to Beijing, but he hadn't announced the trip anyway. So the point is, nobody even knew he was going to Beijing. And then he dramatically, hours before he's supposed to leave for this trip that nobody knows about, tells us that he's canceling the meeting that we didn't know about that was going to take place. And more importantly, the justification he gave for not going on the trip was because of the aggression that it represented from China. Well, that aggression started on January 28th when they flew over the Aleutian Islands in Alaska. Why wait until Friday to cancel it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's my whole point. There's so many I'm going to go back to the piece here. Can Biden handle a crisis? This is not a crisis. A damn balloon coming from China, that's not a crisis. How he handled it, and the lame excuses and the lies and the misrepresentation, I just found it just incredible. I'm sitting here saying, well, if you want to shoot it down over Montana. It's like there's so much space in Montana, like we were just talking about. And then I learned, they shoot it down over the ocean. Well, why would you do that? It's hard as hell to recover stuff in the ocean when you can just do it on the ground. And I don't know. And then I hear Jean-Claude Pierre, whatever the hell her name is, John Pierre, whatever, the press secretary, come and say, well, no, we didn't want to hurt anyone. And most importantly, we had, a system in place where we put the jamming device on and the Chinese couldn't get data from it and we were tracking. And I'm just sitting there going, this is baloney. I'm just flabbergasted. I'm saying, oh my God, they couldn't even handle this. I mean, this is really as basic as it gets. And I'm saying, no wonder his numbers are so damn low like this. I mean, you can't believe what the guy's saying. And then someone said, Joe, you better shoot this thing down finally. And they do it over the ocean after it's already been across the country. And I'm like,
exactly.
I'm like, what in the hell is going on with these people? I mean, look, I don't know. Maybe I'm off on a tangent. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But I don't know. I just thought it was odd, to say the
Well,
least.
look, I think the thing that's so infuriating is that we're being lied to. They were dishonest about the whole thing. They didn't want us to know about it. Why wouldn't they want us to know about it? If Joe Biden, look, they're very concerned about the Hunter Biden laptop behind the scenes, because what is the biggest allegation against Joe Biden? That he's corrupt, not just in Ukraine, but also with China. And so if your goal is, an objective is to come out and prove that you're tough on China, why wouldn't you tell people, hey, I spotted a balloon over the ocean in the Pacific before it came into Montana, and I shot it down because I'm tough on China? And I think the answer to that question is very frightening, but, we were lied to. That's the point. And I just think it's hilarious. So let's just have a moment of humor here for everyone.
Of course.
I just think it's amazing, these clowns, that they are now using Trump did it as a justification that it's okay.
Right.
So for 4 years and even longer, anything Trump did, or even things that they invented that he didn't do that they said he did, that was used as a call for impeachment or lock him up. And now Joe Biden does something that obviously people are scratching their heads saying, this is wrong. This doesn't make sense. You're weak. And they're saying, and they're inventing now, saying, well, Trump did it too, which means it's okay. Right. Unbelievable.
It is unbelievable. Well, a couple minutes left. What do you make? Let's shift to another amazing issue. We still have this porous border down south. What do you make of the fact that the Congress now, with Representative James Conner of Kentucky, they're actually having hearings now, and they're calling former border chiefs up to testify. Mayorkis didn't want this. They've already threatened him with impeachment. Finally, he relented, I think, under threat of subpoena. So now we may get a little more clarity to stuff you and I have been talking about literally for the past 2 years.
Yeah. We need to be doing this. So I'm not suggesting that this shouldn't be happening. It's important. But the problem is, most of the information that we're going to find from these people that are coming up to testify and so on and so forth, well, they're just repeating things that we know. We know that we have an open border. We know that it's intentional because of the Biden administration and Mayorkis. We know that their goal is to import as many illegals as they can into the country. We've seen proposals by the administration in terms of what his kind of immigration reform would look like, which would basically to turn the Border Patrol into some kind of humanitarian organization that's goal is not to prevent in the invasion, but to facilitate it and help these people and greet them with blankets and so on and so forth. They want to, for example, allow these illegals to apply before they come. Yeah. And so it's just going to legitimize what they're already doing. And he, of course, wants them to become citizens as quickly as possible to vote. And the question is, let's have these hearings. Okay, good. But it's just going to be more infuriating because they're doubling down on this. Yep. This open border policy that's happened. This is going to affect us for so long, and unless a future administration, Republican administration, is going to be willing to deport all these people, which I think they must do, by the way, I'm sorry, but that's going to be required. This is the problem. When Democrats have control, that they do as much damage as they can, and then knowing that we have this issue, and then they're going to say, well, our only option now, because look, there's 10 million new illegals here, we can't deport them. It's not possible. Now we've got to figure out what to do with them. It's just it's frightening.
But that's the clear strategy that they're utilizing. Flood the zone, get as many in here as possible, trying to, quote, put pressure on Republicans to do some type of immigration reform. And again, thank goodness for the next 2 years at least, that's not going to happen. So I don't know, it looks like we're at a stalemate, and for the next, between now and January of 25, we're going to continue to have, probably 200,000 a month crossing in, unless somebody comes up with something to get it done. Now, final piece here, and then we'll talk just a little bit about what happened over in Turkey and Syria. One thing Jay Powell said today, I want to bring our audience up to speed on this. Besides the labor thing, that Fed balance sheet right now is at $8.6 trillion. I think one reason the market started coming back down, Powell clearly emphasized that he's going to continue to let the balance sheet shrink. And folks, what that means is the Fed balance sheet, to put it in perspective, before the pandemic, $3 trillion. It's now up to $8.6 trillion. They could shrink that balance sheet, Drew, by $5 trillion just to get it back down to where it was pre-pandemic. Jay Powell slowly over the next few years is going to allow that to happen. Just a point of reference. And then I think we need to obviously mention what happened. Massive earthquake over in Syria and Turkey. The death toll up to 5,000 people now, Drew. Humanitarian crisis in that part of the world.
Yeah, it's hard to comprehend the size of that earthquake, the size of that catastrophe right now. I mean, we haven't seen that certainly in the U.S. in a very long time in terms of earthquakes, and it's devastating. I think once again, a lot of these countries that really wouldn't even be friendly to those places are stepping up and calling for helping out. I think I've seen Israel behind aid as well, and I think when politics is left out of things like this, people are good people and they do the right thing. I think that unfortunately, too often though, as has become the kind of rule, they politicize everything quickly. And I just wish that particularly the Democrat Party in this case would stop doing that with shootings and everything else, because, it's like, it was like when Hamlin, basically collapsed on the field not long ago. It didn't become politicized. And Americans donated to his organization and we prayed, and I just think Americans are good and decent people. People in general are good people, but politics, they try to take advantage and corrupt that, I mean, it's devastating what happened over there. Those are human beings and we are connected in many ways.
Yeah. Well, we got about a minute left. Now, for the millennial minister of truth, what is the one hot topic button that you're talking about on your show more than anything else right now?
Well, I think honestly, it's trying to drive home and help people understand the current DNA of this Democratic Party. They are essentially they have embraced socialism. They've embraced communism in a lighter fashion. They are an authoritarian party, and essentially they admire China, and they're adopting those policies here. Look, the communist Chinese 10 years ago put out this communique amongst their members, warning against threats to their authoritarian rule, and it was constitutionalism, it was a free press. It was the civil society and all these things. And that's what the Democrats are attacking. And look, I mean, they don't have good intentions. And we've just got to really become serious about acknowledging the threats and how serious they are.
Yeah, I concur with you on that. And again, it's never too early to start talking about the next election. We do it on this show. We're going to spare you a little bit now, but I will share this to sort of piggyback on what you said. The only thing, and I mean the only thing standing in the way of what you just said, is that slim, narrow majority we have in the House of Representatives right now. Think back, folks. We saw the damage done during Biden's first 2 years. Can you imagine if these next two, if we did not have the House? I can't. I think it would be a debacle. And that's why as we head into 2024, and you mentioned this about Ronna McDaniel, I know she's only going to do one more term, but Republicans have to come together as we get into election season, because we have a golden opportunity to take back the Senate in 2024 with a very, very friendly map, unlike we had in this last one. But we'll get into that in future shows. Drew, thank you for coming back on. It's great seeing you again, as always. And listen, we got a big year ahead of us this year. We got a lot of battles we're going to have to fight. And I love having you on the show to talk about things, whether we agree or disagree, or we're somewhere in the middle. There's no question about where our viewpoints are. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Mark.
Okay, folks, that's it for today. I'll be back on Thursday. We'll cut through all the propaganda. We'll dissect the State of the Union. We'll watch it so you don't have to, so try to stay awake if you must sit through it. Have a good evening. See you on Thursday.